For the first time in 20 years, the city of Buffalo will elect a new mayor in the November election. On the ballot this year, Democrat Sean Ryan, Republican James Garner, and Independent Michael Gaynor. But where do they stand on the issues? How will they fix city finances? How will they improve city services? I asked all three candidates the same policy-focused questions and gave them enough time to thoroughly answer them. So for the next 90 minutes, sit back, listen to their responses, and you figure out who you think should win in the race to City Hall. You've talked about it a lot on the campaign trail, this perception of distrust within City Hall. Some people in the public think there's a corruption issue within City Hall. Just everyone kind of knows each other, favoring developers. What will you do as mayor to change that image of corruption, untrustworthiness within City Hall?
Right. I mean, transparency, letting the sunshine in, it's the best disinfectant. So we're going to be a very transparent government. We're going to put as much information as possible on a new revamped city's website. People always complain that if they try to get information out of City Hall, it goes through FOIA, it takes a long time, they dodge it. We're just going to make as much possible right there. I have an anti-nepotism platform we've talked about. Another platform is developers or people applying for city contractors can't make political donations during the time that they're applying for contracts. So we have a lot to do, but I think mostly what people want is to make sure that City Hall is run on merit. That the best contractor is getting the contract and the best person is getting hired. And you do that just by being open and transparent with the public. All the jobs in City Hall will be posted publicly. It won't be a big game to try to find out where the jobs are. But after all, that's what city taxpayers deserve. We were funded based on city taxpayers, so we need to give them a product in return that is an open and transparent product.
If you were elected, how would you change that narrative inside City Hall?
Look, it's not just a perception. The only reason I'm running against Sean Ryan is because a backroom deal got cut between him and the Democratic Party chair who wants Sean Ryan's state Senate seat. That's what the voters of Buffalo have seen time and time again. It's this handoff between machine politicians to run city government. In my lifetime, I've only known 3 mayors. 3 mayors in 40 years. That alone is a problem. It's why certain neighborhoods are completely neglected. That's why our services are the way they are. There's been no attempt at accountability. And the reason that that is allowed to happen is because we've had one-party rule in this city for 60 years. It has to stop. The only way to stop it is for people to begin to change the way they vote. And one of the things that I'm most proud about this campaign is that they're going to get a true choice this November. They're going to have the option to say, we're not going to do business as usual anymore. And that is fundamental to Buffalo's turnaround, I think.
How would you change that narrative inside City Hall?
Well, we have something in my campaign that we call a culture of care. And I believe that when it comes down to it, we're going to set the tone from the top down at City Hall. And, I have the great opportunity of coming in as an outsider, as someone that has been working and focused in the neighborhood on neighborhood issues, working with our residents, working with our small business community, working with our not-for-profits, our philanthropy, our university sector to do things really differently. And I've done that. We've brought a lot of new ideas to life on the neighborhoods, in the neighborhoods, and all across the city. And I'm not beholden to anyone. I'm my own person. And I know what works. What I've seen in my 20 years here in the city is how you can get things done in the context of a city government. And what it takes to launch a new idea, what it takes to change and transform a political community and a neighborhood community. And that kind of culture right? Where we set expectations and we hold people to them, where people are in those positions because they have something of value to build. We are going to build a world-class team that is going to guide this city, all right, and direct it in a positive direction that brings transformational change to every neighborhood. And I think that when we come in with a respect for the people that work there, all right, but with an expectation that how we do business, all right, puts our residents first. It puts them in the driving seat. It mobilizes our communities to be involved in envisioning and driving the change that we want to see. And then we build the team to support that. And my leadership team and our administration is going to be the best that this community and the best that this country has to offer. And they're going to be in those positions because of those skills and that experience and that wisdom. And when we bring them here, that's the expectation. And then they create the culture in each of those departments. And that cultural expectation is how we address some of the issues that have held us back in the past.
We've seen some fundamental shifts in downtown in recent years. Pre-COVID, downtown was very different than it is today, and we have not seen people come back post-COVID, whether it be the workforce, the restaurant scene, the bar scene, whatever you want to call it. What plan do you have to attract people back downtown if you were elected?
Sure. The way I look at it is it's a two-pronged problem. There's a short-term and a long-term component. The first short-term component is there's a public safety problem in downtown Buffalo. There's and there's certainly, at the very least, the perception of a public safety problem in downtown Buffalo. People aren't going to come down here if they don't feel safe. They're not going to come down for the restaurants. They're not going to come down for the shows. And if the Sabres aren't good, they're not going to come down at all. And that is the most elemental thing that, as a city, we need to address. We need to see a visible commitment to public safety from City Hall. That's the only way that people are going to have confidence to come down here and to enjoy themselves and avail themselves of all of the wonderful opportunities that downtown Buffalo has. The second part is a long-term thing. What we have in the city, downtown core, is a lack of housing, a lack of diverse housing. We have a good backstop of affordable housing units, whether they're rental, usually rental units in the downtown area, and we have some very high-end real estate. What we don't have is that middle, and that's something that, as mayor, I look forward to working to resolve, because it's that middle part that is really going to be able to drive the economic engine of downtown Buffalo, both in terms of visiting the bars and the restaurants, but also our workforce. If people enjoy living in downtown Buffalo, they're going to enjoy working in downtown Buffalo. And if they enjoy working in downtown Buffalo, they're going to want to live here. That's something that we have to get behind. So it's two big things. You have to address the public safety problem, and you have to address the housing problem.
Since you mentioned the Sabres, do you have a plan to make them better?
I can only tilt at so many windmills,
okay.
Right?
Fair enough. What would be your plan to bring more people back downtown?
Right. Well, I'm going to lean into some of the things that are already happening. And kudos to M&T Bank for the initiatives that they've spearheaded in the last year. They just had a great bike event in Niagara Square last weekend. Their fashion show runway that was on Main Street. We've got to lean into our strengths. We have a business community here that's really invested in this neighborhood. We have small businesses that are operating downtown, many of them that have been here for a while, and some new ones. Particularly the 500 block of Main Street. We have the new International House, right in the heart of the theater district, and entrepreneurs that want to see a vibrant and alive and active downtown. So we have to lean into those organizations and businesses. A lot of those businesses operated over the last 10 to 15 years and then opened and closed their doors because they didn't have the support of the government, right? They didn't have municipal support. We gave municipal support to other projects and initiatives, but the small and medium-sized businesses, the folks that are doing the work in the trenches every day, often get ignored. And we have to lean into that. We need to support them. And we need to support the visionaries. We got to create programming that brings people to downtown, just like M&T has done over the last year. We did that, and we saw that success when Canal Side was getting started, where Buffalo Place was managing projects that scheduled 400 events the first year, that brought people to the waterfront. And now people come naturally to the waterfront. But the final point, Nate, and this is what's the most important, is how do we get people downtown? We invite more people to our city, and we bring more tourism to downtown. All right, I'm encouraged by Buffalo Niagara's vision for a nationwide marketing strategy to bring more tourism here, but we have to share that vision with more people. We need to invite, we are right here strategically located, very close to Niagara Falls, an international destination for tourists. And many of those folks drive right by our back door. And when they do that, they pass right by our cultural institutions and our water resources and our waterfront and all of our amazing neighborhoods and all of our amazing architecture and history, all of our small business communities that would benefit. If we capture 1/2 of those tourists for one day each year, that's $1.5 billion investment into our downtown community, into our commercial business districts, into our hotels, our restaurants, our small shops. All of those things benefit when we have a vision and we start to tell the world about Buffalo. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to, first of all, invite this campaign as being transformational. People are going to know real quick, you know, when a community leader gets elected and overcomes the opposition of a very powerful Democratic machine, that something different is happening here in Buffalo. And we're going to invite people to be part of it.
What's your plan to attract people back to the downtown district core?
So there's less people working downtown, but that's not really the only problem, right? So you need a downtown development plan, and my development plan will have 4 parts. You know, one is infrastructure. Are the streets in good shape? Are the sidewalks in good shape? Do the lights go on when they're supposed to go on? Do the crosswalks work? Do the cross-street buttons work? The second part about a good downtown is programming. We remember when Thursdays in the Square brought in or kept thousands of people. The Gus Macker basketball tournament. We got to get going. M&T just did a good program this weekend with Go Bike, Circle the Square, bicycles going 100 times around downtown, around Niagara Square. Fun activities. But we need to do that all the time. Buffalo Place is the engine that should be pulling this train. They're going to have new leadership by the time I come into office. There's going to be a new president of the board and a new executive director. But we're going to put a priority on programming. There's no reason it can't be Tango Tuesday in Niagara Square. Just need a lot of events to get people to come, but also to keep people who are there. It is like the chicken and the egg now, where companies say they're trying to bring people back, and their employees say, oh, I don't want to be downtown. There's no benefit. So you make it a benefit. You know, I used to go to work and bring an extra set of clothes because I would stay, change into my street clothes to go to Thursday in the Square. It was a benefit from being downtown. We got to get back to having downtown be the place where it's the destination for fun. And so it either brings you down or keeps you if you're already there. And the other problem with downtown is safety. People need to feel safe. The more downtown is empty, the more you feel alone and you start feeling a little cautious. We've had a problem with unhoused people living downtown. People gather around a central library around Lafayette Square. We need to have a complete 360 program with people from the social services side, the mental health side, the shelter side, the police department, the fire department, all working together. But nobody wants their loved one, you know, sleeping outside in the rough. That's not good for anyone. It's not good for downtown. And then the fourth thing you need to bring back downtown, you need a business-friendly city hall. Can't tell you the conversations I've had with restaurateurs, people trying to open retail, that it's so hard to get the permits out of City Hall. You have to come back tomorrow. You have to come back tomorrow. Now you have to go to this department. Now you have to go to the cashier, but they're closed. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I met a woman who opened a used bookstore, and the number of trips she had to take downtown, it's just preposterous. So under my administration, anyone who comes in for a license regarding a small business, a permit, we're going to assign a liaison directly to that person to help them walk through the different steps it takes. Remember, small business people, they don't have lawyers and architects and accountants coming in with them. They don't have staff to do that. So the city needs to step in place to be their staff to make it sure getting a permit out of City Hall is a seamless transaction, because that's how you attract new businesses downtown.
Knowing that city finances are delicate, though, how do you fund those 4 initiatives that you're discussing?
Well, I mean, the infrastructure is paid out of bonding. We're nowhere near our bonding limit. The programming mostly comes from partners who are already receiving funds through the Business Improvement District. That's Buffalo Place. The safety, we already have programs around public safety, and the county is really geared up to provide services to the people with mental health problems and the homeless. We just need to coordinate them. So 3 of the 4 things I talked about are cost neutral. The 4th one is assigning a liaison to each small business owner. That's something you have to reprioritize where you're spending your current money and shift it over to that priority.
Part of the issues downtown, though, are vacant lots, abandoned buildings, long neglected buildings, whether it be AMAs or the businesses within Main Street Mall, not to pick on them, but the Main Street Mall is not what it once was.
Right.
How do you plan to address those kind of blighted areas of downtown?
Right. And this is where it becomes a collective strategy, right? I don't think the city can do this alone. All of my initiatives and all of my efforts are about bringing more people to the table. How do we mobilize our partners at the county? How do we mobilize state resources to do best? And I'll tell you, if you look at downtown over the last 20 years, one of the great things that I can say about the Byron Brown administration is that we did transform a good many old buildings, right? And we did that using historic tax credits. We did that with brownfield remediation tax credits. So the buildings that aren't being converted right now are buildings that aren't qualifying for those tax credit programs. So we have to figure out other ways to incentivize those projects to make them work, because we need to have a concerted focus and effort on how to transform some of those commercial spaces into residential spaces. And we've seen it where the tax credit system has worked and has been leveraged to do some really transformational projects. So we have to be creative. We may have to talk to our state partners. We may have to create a new program, that brings more tools and more resources to projects that right now don't fit those other criteria.
How do you effectively address that issue downtown?
Yeah, I would back it up and say, first you need to have a downtown plan. Because once you have a plan that's working, then you're less likely to be whipsawed by one project that goes wrong or one project that stops. And the second thing you need to do, you need to have comprehensive code enforcement. M&As didn't become M&As overnight. It took decades for M&As to get into that shape. But during those whole decades, those owners should have been held accountable. They should have been held accountable to the city. But instead, every year, it got worse and worse and worse. And sooner or later, it's going to be the city's problem. It already is the city's problem. The same with the vacant Adams Mark Hotel. The owner in there, that owner is probably distressed. There was a fire. But you can't just ignore these things. Like you gotta face them head on. But more importantly, you just gotta make it so you have the environment where you're not creating the next M&As. But the city has tools in their toolbox that they don't currently use. One is strict code enforcement, and the other ones are programs where you divest the owner of responsibility for the property. So you can do a receivership program where you take the property over, give it to a private receiver. They pay their taxes, rents, and do repairs over it. The owner gets whatever left over. You can have a property deemed abandoned, take it over, or you could do eminent domain. Those are tools in our toolbox that the city has been reluctant to use. You saw the situation over on St. Louis Place where there was that violent crime. 2 people lost their lives. But the house on that block where the problem stemmed from, over 100 311 calls. The city should have put that house in receivership program years ago, but they didn't do it.
How can you address that and institute, enough changes to bring those all back to life?
Sure. So those are obviously 3 very different pieces of property individually, and they speak to sort of a larger problem. One, you have the Main Place Mall, which is privately owned. The office building is a functional office tower. The mall space is underutilized. And I think a lot of that is underutilized is because it's very difficult to run a business downtown right now. And it's gotten, even in my career, it's gotten harder and harder. You see fewer and fewer businesses. The Main Place Mall is sort of indicative of the economic stagnation that we're seeing in downtown Buffalo. The vacant lot is, that is also privately owned. And, when you drive by it, I always think for the moment, it'd make a lovely passive park. But again, it gets to someone's paying taxes on that parcel of land, and they haven't found a good use for it. And the reason they haven't found a good use for it is because downtown Buffalo isn't a very friendly place to invest right now. And that's something that we need to address. Obviously, we can talk about the public safety component, but it's also making City Hall generally a better place, a better partner for private businesses. And then you have the AM&A situation. The AM&A situation is probably the easiest one of the three to fix, because that's a piece of land, even though it's in private hands, it has been lit up like a Christmas tree on all kinds of violations. And what is astounding to me is the city of Buffalo, for whatever reason, hasn't taken the necessary steps to assert itself into the legal proceedings that are currently unfolding as it relates to those pieces of property. So we heard earlier this week of how there was some reporting about how the city of Buffalo has done almost nothing to address the unpaid housing court fines that get assessed. If the city isn't serious about collecting on housing court fines, why would a property owner be serious about curing the issue? Secondly, we have ample tools in the city code and charter right now, and one of the most powerful tools available is a nuisance designation. And when you get into a situation where a property becomes blighted, and I would argue that that's exactly what AM&A's is, it's a blighted property, that has become a public nuisance. If you look at the statute that's on the books right now, it usually deals with drug dealing and drug homes. The same standards could apply to blighted pieces of property, blighted buildings. And I would advocate for including blight as a public nuisance. And I would, if a piece of property becomes, whether it's a house in your neighborhood, that one house that's always a problem, or if it's a commercial building, or if it's something as big as AM&A's, when I'm mayor, we're going to take immediate action to address it. And if it needs be, we're going to slap a city board on it, declare it a public nuisance, and you're going to see me in housing court.
Shifting to crime, we've seen crime stats across the city very low compared to this time last year, which is, of course, a good thing.
It is.
Quality of life crime, though, is still a concern amongst neighborhood block clubs, people I've spoken to. What's your public safety plan, and how will you continue to maintain these low crime rates?
Yeah, so I have a comprehensive public safety plan. Go to my website. It's there. It lays it all out. Public safety is it's a 360 thing. It's not just police officers. It's police officers. It's community policing. It's violence interrupters and working with mental health organizations. So, a lot goes into driving that crime rate down. But, we've returned in many categories to pre-COVID crime rate, which were really the lowest, in post-World War II America. So we're happy those violent crimes are down. One violent crime is too many. So I always have to keep working on it. But we need to implement my public safety platform. And part of that public safety platform is you prevent crime through community policing and active policing. Hold criminals accountable. Illegal guns, anything to do with violence, you have to hold people accountable. People with multiple arrests need to be held accountable. You also need to restore trust. Not long ago, the city used to put on its website every shooting that occurred in the city of Buffalo, every homicide that occurred in the city of Buffalo. That got taken down. So you can't fault people for not knowing that violent crime is down, because the city itself is sort of shielding that information, because I think they thought it was going to be bad news, so they figured we'll just take it down. But quality of life crimes are the ones that, once violent crime is down, then you have to turn your attention to quality of life. And you have people getting their cars stolen. There's a new rash of car theft. Mm-hmm. There used to be the Kia boys. Mm-hmm. Now there's new technology where people can start your cars because of your key fobs. We just need to communicate with the public a lot on this to let them know what is happening. And that's not what's happening now. We're not communicating to the public what's going on in your neighborhood, what are the steps you can do to help prevent that crime, and then what do you do if you are a victim of that crime.
What is your public safety plan to address quality of life issue crime in the city?
Right. So this is something that in every corner of the city I've heard. The number one issue at every block club, at every community meeting I've been, is public safety. It's car thefts, break-ins, car poppings, the overall feeling of unease and the lack of perceived safety in our city. That is very, very real, and it has to be addressed. The first thing that I would do, as somebody who comes from a background in public safety and the criminal justice system, is one, I think when it comes to the Buffalo Police Department, we have to raise our standards. And what I mean by that is we need to raise the admission standards of new police officers. Right now, if you have a GED and you're 19 years old, you can be a Buffalo police officer. That's not cutting it. We need a minimum of a 2-year degree before we give a young individual a gun and a shield and say, use your best judgment to keep our community safe. The second thing that we need to do is really is sort of move forward with this, this problem of residential burglaries, car poppings, and car thefts. And right now, the Buffalo Police Department can't pursue a stolen car, and judges can't hold the people who have stolen the car. So they can't catch them and they can't keep them. That is a fundamental problem with our criminal justice system. We need to change that, at least in the short term, to allow the Buffalo police officers to do their jobs. The third thing that we need to do is again, dealing with the short-term burglary, car theft problem is, and I mentioned this in a press conference that you covered a couple weeks ago, is this is it's a region-wide problem. We have to really get into and network with our surrounding suburban departments, because oftentimes criminals are stealing cars in the suburbs and driving them into the city, or they're stealing things out of the city and selling them out in the suburbs. It's a regional problem. We need a regional solution to fix it. And lastly, what we need to do is fundamentally change our laws. And that's something that, as a mayor, I'm going to be advocating for every single day. This suite of pro-criminal legislation that has come out of Albany over the past 4 and 5 years, whether it's bail reform, parole less is more reform, raise the age legislation, discovery reform, all of these pieces of legislation have made it easier to commit crimes in the city of Buffalo. It's made it easier to be a criminal in the city of Buffalo. That has to stop. We need to get back to the idea of holding criminals accountable. And when I'm mayor, that is something that I'm going to work on every single day.
What's your public safety plan to make sure that trend downward continues?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. The statistics are irrelevant. I'm encouraged that, certainly violent crime is down. We've seen a decrease in homicides and in the city over the last year or two, and that's encouraging. But the hard part is, and the question that we really should be asking is, do people feel safe in their neighborhoods? Do they feel secure? Do they feel connected? Do they feel a strong sense of place? And, I've had the opportunity to be, the last few days down in South Buffalo, and it is a very strong sense of community. I haven't spent a lot of time there, but the people there look after each other. And they patronize their businesses there, and there's a strong culture and tradition of community. And what we need is to have that same feeling in every neighborhood. But not only that, even those neighborhoods feel like crime is out of control. Car burglaries, break-ins, all kinds of social service concerns. So we have to look, it's a big picture strategy, which we're going to talk about in this interview, that it's not something that has an easy solution. It really is a vision and a transformation and an approach that mobilizes all of our city departments, all of our communities, right, to focus on how to make each neighborhood feel more connected and feel more safe and feel more secure.
On top of your public safety plan, what would be your plan to ensure there's proper police oversight and accountability within the police department?
Sure. We live in an age now where it's never been easier to hold police officers accountable, and that's in the sense that everybody in the Buffalo Police Department now has to wear or at least patrol officers have to wear body camera footage. Ultimately, as mayor, I'm personally responsible for the officers that I employ. The accountability begins and ends with me. That being said, the availability of that body camera footage, in my experience, both as a prosecutor and as a judge, or not a judge, working for a judge. I don't want to give myself a promotion. Working for a judge. What I've seen body camera footage do is exonerate 99% of all the claims of police brutality or police misconduct. And in those one cases where a police officer does something wrong, exceeds their authority, does something illegal, you have a record of it. Those are it is in this day and age, that is the greatest possible tool to assure that the Buffalo Police Department remains a department filled with professionals, as I know they are.
How do you hold police accountable? How will you continue to hold police accountable?
Well, I think, again, this has to do with leadership, accountability, and who is in the driver's seat in terms of our commissioners and also the culture in which they exist. I've met during this process over the last 6 to 8 months a good number of police officers and police chiefs, and the vast majority of them are doing the right thing, all right? When there's not accountability, it's because people know that there's not going to be, right, a high level of accountability or high level expectation for how that's going to all pan out. Maybe they get some paid leave, there is some internal affairs investigation, and then they return to the workforce. Like, we need to set the tone, all right, for what culture of care looks like. It looks like, what it looks like is building trust between our police force and our communities. I'm really encouraged by the foot patrols. But our resource base currently, because of the burden of social service calls, homelessness, drug addiction, these types of issues, right? We don't have the resources to put more people on the street. But walking the beat and building trust, right, between our communities and law enforcement is where we start. When you have trust, when you know people, when you know the local business owner, when you know the kids on the street, all right, you tend to approach them and engage with them in a different way. And that's the culture, and that's the example that we need to set. And that starts with leadership. The person that we choose as the next commissioner of police is going to be someone that comes in here and has a very acute attention to detail when it comes to expectations and accountability. And secondly, it's going to be someone that is able to, share that culture and that level of expectation with everyone on the force.
What will you do to ensure there's police accountability if you were mayor?
Every city employee is going to be held accountable for the job that they were hired to do. I'm going to expect an A+ out of every element of City Hall. I want an A+ snowplow driver, A+ person who cleans playgrounds, A+ person who cuts the grass, A+ police officers, and A+ firefighters. No element of the workforce is going to be given a pass on that. An A+ means working constructively with the public, treating the public respectfully, and making sure you use all the contractual rights at your disposal to make sure that people of the city of Buffalo are getting the best from their public servants.
Buffalo remains one of the poorest cities for its size in the nation, and the needle really didn't move over the last administration, the Byron Brown administration. It was in the top 5 when he took office, and it was still in the top 5 when he left office last October. What would you do to address this decades-old problem?
Well, I'm going to lean into some big picture solutions right now, which is, we need to have a transformational view of how we're going to get things done here in the city. And I'll use the Kensington Expressway project as an example, because here is a project that isn't just a highway project, isn't just a neighborhood project. This is a city-wide project that has economic implications for the entire city, okay? The reason we have concentrated poverty, the reason why some of our neighborhoods on the east side look the way that they do, is because decades of neglect, decades of divestment. That's not acceptable, to me or the people that are around me and my team or to my administration. And we're going to change that, all right, by building the capacity of our neighborhoods, by investing directly into those streets. We're going to put our neighbors in the driver's seat of decision making and problem solving. We're going to start an initiative called City Action Corps that is going to educate young people that are out of school and out of work, doing work directly in the neighborhood that changes the way it looks, that communicates to those neighborhoods that people care, that there's an investment there. And when you do that, it changes the psychology of a place. People start to care for their homes because they realize, wow, the city is trying to make some change here. They're trying and caring about this neighborhood. And all of a sudden, people start to do the same thing. I saw it on Northampton Street during 20 years ago when we invested there. And they had some extra money left over. And then Commissioner Stepniak called us and said, we're giving the whole neighborhood new sidewalks. A small thing, but it was so powerful in how it transformed how people thought about their neighborhood and the pride that they took in their neighborhood. People started to clean up the trash. People started to maintain their homes in ways that I hadn't seen in 4 or 5 years prior to that. And it was because of that change, that investment, that care, that, that hopefulness that this neighborhood could be different. A project like the Kensington has that type of capacity and that type of potential to put economic energy and traffic and customers back onto our commercial corridors. That will stimulate investment. That will drive change. That will support local hiring. That will support startup of businesses. That in itself will drive the rehab of existing buildings. And then what we do is we start small little fires all over the city of economic investment, of business growth, of wealth, building generational wealth. And we start to see then how when you combine investment, transformational change, young adult mentoring, putting neighbors in the driver's seat of decision making and directing where resources go and what their needs are, our neighborhoods know best what they need. And yet, time after time, we've seen over the last 20 years where City Hall comes up with a plan almost in a vacuum, and they drop it in the laps of our neighborhoods, and they're like, that's not what we need. Listen to us. My mentor, Bill Johnson, previous mayor of Rochester, implemented a program just like this called Neighbors Building Neighborhoods. And in so doing, he put those neighbors in the driver's seat. They had pride in that position. They had pride in the work that they did, and they drove transformational changes that weren't on the radar of the city. Go down through the community, the neighborhood, the arts community in Rochester. I can't remember, maybe it's the Avenue of the Arts where the museums are. That neighborhood was transformed because residents insisted on a 4-lane road being reduced to a 2-lane road. So people slowed down. They stopped and patronized the businesses. They enjoyed the murals. And it transformed the neighborhoods around that. That's what happens when we put our neighbors in the driver's seat. That's what happens when we invest in young people and our seniors and our youth and our children.
What can you do as mayor to move the needle on poverty in the city of Buffalo?
Right. So most of the poverty in the city of Buffalo comes as a result of generations of disinvestment. So you drive around the East Side community, and you see, roads that are in bad repair, community centers are in bad repair, city-owned lots that are knee-high. So you need to deliver basic services to people, but you also have to have goals. Black home ownership in Buffalo is below the norm of black home ownership nationally. And the national number is nothing to be proud of, but we're below that. So we have to have home ownership programs, specifically targeted the areas of the city of Buffalo where the home ownership rate is low. We have to do things like work on lead paint poisoning, so kids who are coming up in Buffalo have an equal chance of success and don't have organic brain damage as a result of being subjected to lead paint poisoning. We have to work on our workforce, make sure that our school district is doing what it's supposed to do, but also helping to upscale people who are in full-time jobs now, when there's other jobs in the market that could pay more. Some people need help to climb that ladder, but you can only do this if you intentionally and straightforwardly address the problem, say what the problem is, and make some fixes to those.
What would be your plan to address that decades-old problem?
Sure, and this is a problem that afflicts lots of cities. Buffalo's not alone here. And believe me, if there was some silver bullet that could solve this problem, with all the time and money that we've thrown at it as a country, surely we would have found it by now. What I'll do as mayor is work with all the available stakeholders to help address this issue, from the federal government all the way down to Buffalo Public Schools, and all schools actually, because I think all of those different stakeholders have something to offer in the solution of generational poverty. Two things that I think are vitally important as mayor and are going to be priorities of mine is, one, the construction of new housing. There's no greater way to defeat generational poverty than providing people the opportunity to own their own home, to have an asset to pass down, one, for stable living, and two, to have an asset that they can pass down to their children. It does two things. It lifts them out of that poverty, breaks that cycle, and the other benefit to the city of Buffalo is you're returning parcels of land to the tax rolls. So housing is a huge part of it. Also is education. Education, I think, is if there's ever a panacea to most of our ills as a society, it's in our education system. We need to do a much better job as a city of supporting high-performing schools, whether they're charter schools, whether they're public schools, whether they're Catholic schools, whether they're private schools. As mayor, my job is to make sure that parents and residents have access to the highest performing schools available, a variety of options, and I include trade schools. That's another thing that gets off, it's given short shrift in our current education climate in this city, is trade schools. Parents want and expect options for their kids. And being able to keep those young people engaged in schooling and setting themselves up for a lifetime of a career that they're passionate about is going to do almost as much as that new house, that ability to have an asset to pass down, the ability to have an education and to have a career moving forward. Those two things are how we're going to break the cycle of poverty.
There's been several issues over the last many decades. People coming in out of town, buying up properties, sitting on them, or jacking rents up. And there's been many solutions on the table. One of them at the state level has been the good cause eviction. Buffalo has not implemented anything in that regard. Is that something you would push for if elected? And what other ways can you prevent kind of corporate ownership of these single, double family homes in Buffalo, so they don't end up in the hands of regular citizens and corporations own them?
Yeah. A lot of times we have problems in Buffalo, we like to say they come from the outside. But the vast majority of rental property in Buffalo is held by people who live in the 716 area code. Mm-hmm. So we need to do code compliance to make sure that people are given good quality housing. Mm-hmm. We need to increase our housing stock because that's what brings down rents. So we need to continue the programs that I got funded through New York State to get vacant doubles back online and to build new housing as part of my block by block initiative. But the hidden part of that state program I put together is money to help people who fall behind on their rent. The vast majority of evictions in the city of Buffalo are because people fell behind on their rent. And I did some research, and the average family in Buffalo gets evicted for under $1,200. If you go around on Big Garbage Day, you'll see whole houses on the front curb, and something really bad happened there, that somebody had to exit that quickly, but had to leave everything. So they're starting off they have to start over again. All the money that they spent over the years to buy beds, to buy dressers, and then if you can't find a house, you end up being housed by the county. Cost about $8,000 to rehouse somebody. So we're letting people get evicted for under $1,200, and it's costing us $8,000 to rehouse them, and people's lives are being turned upside down. So I have a program that's in effect now that allows the county to help people pay their back rent, mm-hmm. to keep them in their current houses. Because the cheapest, most humane thing you can do is keep people in their current house. Once they're out of their current house, then everything kind of starts cascading on people personally, but also the cost to the taxpayers. So right now, hundreds of people in the city of Buffalo are being kept in their homes homes through that program. And it turns out to be the most economical way to keep people in their homes.
Regarding housing, despite the state giving cities authority to do so, Buffalo has not enacted any good cause eviction laws on the books right now. If you were elected, is that something that you would push the Common Council to pass?
No, and I would veto it if they did. I don't believe that if you own a piece of property, if you own a building, if you own a home, and you are abiding by all state and federal laws, that is your piece of property. What the government shouldn't be doing, and if you're a landlord, what the government shouldn't be doing is telling you how to run your business. The idea that there's going to be a limit on the amount of rent that you can charge, or even worse, try this example. If you have a double and you have two tenants that don't get along with each other, and one of them has to go, you can't get rid of them. You're in an intractable situation. That isn't good for anybody. I understand the frustration with the affordability problem that the city of Buffalo has right now. We're probably the only city in America that has this urban prairie of land that's available to build homes, and then we have a housing crisis in the form of houses are too expensive to buy and rents are going through the roof. What I will commit to, though, is advocating for the addition of another housing court judge. It baffles me that at a city the size of Buffalo, the second largest city in the state of New York, we've got one housing court judge. And that, I don't mean to denigrate the judge that's there, but that's a huge undertaking. And you're talking about everything from housing fines to evictions. That's at a minimum with the huge budget that the Office of Court Administration has at its disposal. They should at least, if they're not going to give us a full-time housing court judge, they can bring in another judge that's going to hear housing court matters, because we have to speed things up. We have to speed things up for tenants who are stuck in a slum-filled with a slumlord as a landlord, and they're not getting any redress. And we have to do that for landlords who have a tenant who hasn't paid them a nickel in 2 years. And we have to do it for our neighbors who are stuck next to houses that are poorly maintained and have become eyesores or attraction points for crime and other things. We can easily get a second judge to hear those issues, to speed that docket along, and give the relief to residents that they so desperately want.
Is that something you support, and how would you get that across the finish line?
Well, I can't tell you that I support it or that I don't support it, to be honest with you, because I have to understand the implications. I wear many hats. I'm a business owner, I'm a community person, I'm a landlord, I've also been a renter for many months. For many years, in my early years here in Buffalo. So, I understand the challenges of being a landlord when you're trying to do the right thing, but you're pressured if you have a tenant that's not paying the rent. That would put an immense burden on me as a landlord, and we have a lot of responsible landlords, okay? So we have to look at it from every angle and every perspective. Similarly, I care about our tenant community very, very seriously. And I've seen examples where people are living in squalor, where people don't have furnaces, where there's wires hanging out of the wall, or there's holes in the floor. Those conditions are unacceptable to me. So what we need to do is look at the root causes of these problems. And the reason why sometimes legislation arises, right, is because it's reacting to a situation. Right? Maybe it's reacting to inadequate, unsafe housing, or maybe it's reacting to the fact that people unjustly get removed from their apartments. But at some point, beneath all of that, is there a root cause? And what I have always been focused on is how do we get to the root causes of problems? And often legislation just band-aids, and then people will find an end around or a loophole to get through the legislation. We need to be rigorous in our enforcement. We need to bring more resources to inspections of apartments and housing to make sure that people are living in quality, safe, affordable housing, not these apartments where, you know, people can barely maintain a decent quality of life or have any shred of dignity or self-care or hopefulness for the future based on those conditions. It is a big picture solution that requires us to mobilize resources from the city to do things differently. And if we do those, and our analysis reveals that, you know, there's something that we've identified as a problem but can't solve it through other strategies, you know, more diligent code enforcement and holding, you know, irresponsible landlords accountable, right? Then yes, let's look at the legislation, and then I will drive it, you know, hard and strong through the council and make sure that we have the community support to back it up. All right, the council shouldn't be asked to just willy-nilly pass legislation. They should be out there getting support for these ideas, bringing voices of the community forward, and getting support for that so that they know that this isn't, they need to be listening to these arguments by both the landlord community and the tenant community so that we have a thorough understanding of what our needs are at the community and then how we best solve them.
City finances have dominated the headlines over the course of the last year. How will you fix budget gaps? Will you raise revenue? What's your strategy for fixing the finances of the city?
Sure. So the most frustrating part of this problem is we don't really know how bad it's going to be. We know it's bad, but until the audited numbers come in for last year's budget for the fiscal year ending in June of 25, we don't really know how large this budget deficit is going to be. So we're kind of flying in the dark to a certain extent. In my review of the budget, it appears that we're going to have at least a $50 to $60 million budget deficit. The first thing that jumps off the page of anybody who goes through that, who reads that budget, is that the city of Buffalo has a spending problem. From over the past 2 fiscal years that we have audited numbers for, expenses in the city of Buffalo have grown 30%. 30%. And the people who have done this, the mayor who saw this coming and the people on the Common Council who saw this coming, they knew the money was going to run out, and still expenses grew 30% over 2 years. Part of that growth over the past 2 years, so the last fiscal year, the one that ended, that we have numbers for in 2024, personnel costs went up 11%. We're anticipating that the personnel costs over the past budget that we don't have the numbers for went up another 5%. That's a 16% increase in personnel costs in 2 years. We have a spending problem. And which is why the first thing that we need to do is go in and address that side of the ledger. You know, there is as you look at the city finances and the city budget, as mayor, one of my jobs is going to be, and how I'm going to approach this, is the right sizing that needs to happen is basically divide things into wants and needs. Right now, the needs that I believe the city of Buffalo has are the essential services that people expect from City Hall. The things that you see, your police, fire, garbage collection, street paving, snow removal, the stuff that people, residents, taxpayers expect that the city is going to be able to do. That's the core function of City Hall. That's what I'm going to commit our resources to. Anything that falls outside of that core function is frankly a luxury that we can no longer afford. We're going to have to make some very difficult decisions over the next 4 years. And one of the things that we're going to have to do is adhere to that wants versus needs balancing of equities. And so in making those decisions and in trimming away some of the luxuries, what I've been able to identify, and also with better management of certain departments, is savings of about $30 million. And when you couple that with if you're right-sizing government to the point where you're cutting $30 million in expenses, now we can start looking at how we're going to be able to grow our revenues. And I alluded to it earlier, but the city of Buffalo has, at least with the housing court fines, $10 million in unpaid debts. That's not even considering parking fines that haven't been collected, traffic fines that haven't been collected because of a change in New York State law. Your license no longer gets suspended if you don't pay your tickets. People just don't pay their tickets anymore. There's tens of millions of dollars there available in unclaimed and, well, not unclaimed, but unpaid debt to the city of Buffalo. And the city of Buffalo has the tools at its disposal to collect those debts. It hasn't done it. So we need to start doing that. We need to start collecting those debts. We need to start bringing that money back into the general fund. If you add that up, hopefully we're approaching between the $10 million, what we've sort of estimated. There's the $10 million for the housing fines. I'd say it's a minimum of at least $10 million in outstanding traffic fines, and probably another $10 million in parking fines. It's a huge amount of money that's out there. That is how we're going to start closing this budget. If that isn't enough, right? And we don't know the size of the problem yet. If we do have to deficit bond, we have to tie those bonds to income. This idea that we can just borrow money without paying for it, without identifying a funding source, is ludicrous. You can't borrow your way out of debt when you don't have a way to pay for it. No one is going to buy that debt. The only person, if you don't have a way to pay for it, no one's going to buy that bond. And one of two things is going to happen. The bond isn't going to get sold, or if it's going to get sold, your rating is going to go right down the drain. The other option is a hard control board, which is something that I do not want to see happen in the city of Buffalo because of the disastrous consequences it can have for the people who work and that we depend on in City Hall. So if we need to do that, engage in that kind of deficit bonds, what I would propose to do is look at the revenue that we have that the city generates from those parking garages that some people want to sell so quickly. That's $5 million in annual recurring revenue that the city gets from those parking garages. If we pledged less than half of that against a bond, we'd be able to raise an additional $30 million. We'd have a way to pay for it, and we preserve our credit rating. What I don't want to see happen is engage or have people to think that we can tax our way out of this problem. We cannot. The city of Buffalo collects $180 million out of its property taxes. So everybody's property taxes, whether you're a business or a resident, everybody's taxes, you add them together, it's $180 million. 37% of that, as soon as it comes in, has to go to the Buffalo Public Schools, which means $70 million of that $180 goes to Buffalo Public Schools, even though their budget, by the way, is twice that of the city of Buffalo's. It's $1.3 billion. We write them a check. That leaves us with $110 million in net revenue from our property taxes. If you add up our healthcare costs and our pension liability as a city, you get $162 million. Our property taxes don't even come close to covering our pension and healthcare costs. And in order to cover that, we'd have to raise taxes 30%. You'd have to raise them 30% to raise that additional revenue. And no one is going to stand for a 30% increase in taxes and stay in the city of Buffalo. So the idea that we can tax our way out of this problem is a non-starter. And I think if you do start raising taxes, you start whittling away of the one comparative advantage that we have as a city, which is the expectation that it's still a reasonable place to live in terms of cost, even with our affordability problems. And you're not making a dent. You're not making a dent in the problem. You have to ultimately right-size the city government. And if you do that, if you show that we're serious about governing ourselves, it makes it more likely that New York State, which is our primary funder of our city budget anyway, New York, the vast majority of money that gets allocated that comes to the city of Buffalo isn't through property taxes, it's direct aid from the state. And if we're ever going to ask New York State for more money, which is what we're going to need to do, we better have our financial house in order, because right now we don't look like a very good investment.
What will you do to fill the budget gaps and raise revenues for the city if you're elected?
Well, I think that it's going to start with a team approach. I have lots of ideas, but I'm not a municipal finance expert. But we are going to build, all right, an unprecedented municipal finance team that's going to do the analysis, that's going to evaluate where we've been, and it's going to chart a path for where we go. I know the strategy is not incurring more debt, okay? I don't want to be saddled with debt. I'm a problem solver. I'm not a finance person, but you better believe I'm going to have the smartest people in the room, and they're going to be advising me. And then based on that analysis, we're going to make a plan and a strategy that embraces our resources, embraces our capacity, and helps us to leverage resources to get more done more efficiently. And that's where my role comes in. As a person that has been solving problems in this city, look at my track record. I started 3 organizations from the ground up with no resources, no backing, no funding, just committed people that were focused and determined to improve their neighborhoods and their cities and to launch an idea. That's the same kind of approach that I'm going to bring to City Hall. We're going to analyze each department. What are they doing? What do they need to be doing? And I've already begun that process, speaking to people at City Hall, speaking to people in the field, speaking to the people every day that are doing the work. They, like our neighbors, have the insight and the perspective into what works and what doesn't work, how we can be more creative, how we can cut costs, how we can save on overtime, where our Achilles heel is when it comes to service delivery, and where our opportunities are. And then we're going to figure out how to fund that. We're going to utilize the resources that we have, and we have to shift some things around. But I'm telling you, it's going to be a big picture transformation, because what we're doing, or what we have been doing, hasn't been delivering the results to the neighborhood that we need to see. And I've been on the receiving end of that. For 20 years living on the East Side, I've seen how that neglect impacts neighborhoods. But there's so much good that's happening. We have to figure out how to leverage that good in every neighborhood to get more done, all right, without increasing our debt, while also staying disciplined and while holding the line on our spending. You cannot set a budget requirement and then exceed it year after year after year after year. That's my role too, is being that of the person that holds the line, that offers the accountability. The budget process is a 12-year process. It's not like you pass the budget in July and all of a sudden you don't have to think about it till May. I'm thinking about it in August. Where are we at in terms of projections versus our actual? I'm thinking about it in September. Where are our sales tax collections? What's the condition with the state and the federal government? How is the situation on the federal government affecting state and local government? We have to be constantly tuned in to the conditions that are affecting us in our everyday world, and adjusting and making tweaks and going back to those department heads, going back to those commissioners and reminding them, you know, being firm with them in terms of what their projections were and where they are in that process. We're not going to look back after 6 months or a year and say, well, we overspent on overtime $4 million. Sorry, that's not acceptable. And those people will lose their jobs as commissioners and department heads if that's their attitude, because they have a responsibility to the taxpayers of this city. They have a responsibility to our responsible finance, and to me as a member of that team, to bring problems before they spiral out of control. All right? If we're over budget, that is an indication that somewhere something is amiss. And that's where we go to work. We start solving problems. Okay, overtime's $5-7 million. I'm not going to make a mandate. I'm going to put on my thinking cap. How do we make it work better? All right? Do we need to bring more cadets in this year? Do we need to bring more people to the table? Like, we're going to bring the county to the table. All right? The county receives more state funding for mental health services, for homelessness, for drug addiction. We don't get that money. The county does. They're going to be at the table, and they're going to help us put more boots on the ground in our neighborhoods so that we intervene and we prevent social service problems from occurring, and safety concerns and crime before it happens, because we're going to have a whole new approach that addresses prevention and intervention before things get out of control. That's a cultural change.
What will you do to fill budget gaps and possibly raise new revenue for the city?
Yeah, I'm going to come up with a plan. It's going to be a 3-year get back on our feet plan, but it's going to be an honest plan. It's going to stabilize the budget, build reserves. You know, I always say the city budget is like being stuck in a snowbank. You know, if you're stuck in a snowbank, if you just put the gas on, you just spin, nothing happens. You got to take incremental steps. You got to start rocking your car, and that's what's going to get you out of the snowbank. And the city's been in a snowbank that took over a decade, you know, to get into this deep mess we're in. So we need to stabilize the finances. We need to work with our state partners to help us on a 3-year recovery plan. We need to work with County Executive Mark Polenkars to make sure we're not duplicating services that are coming into the city, see how the county can help. We have to look at revenue growth. Every new house we put up in the city of Buffalo, you know, they're paying into the ante on the city's tax bills. So we need to get more growth, and that'll bring in revenue. But we also need to be honest about our budget, honest about how big our hole is. City Hall, it's incumbent upon me to come up with the most efficient, cost-effective way to deliver high-quality services. But we can't sugarcoat the budgets anymore. We can't put in phony numbers that suggest our revenue is going to be higher. We can't fudge our expenditures and then get to the third quarter and say, oh my gosh, we're out of balance again. So right now, you know, we're out of balance. We're going to be ending this fiscal year and starting the next fiscal year somewhere between $50 and $80 million in the hole. We have a lot of work to do with that. But I think the best thing you can do in this is be dead honest with the people of Buffalo, how deep our hole is. Then we all work together to start rocking this car out of the snowbank.
As a way to get out of that snowbank, would consistent tax increases be on the table?
Sure, you have to bring in revenues, whether it's from taxes. You know, we went 19 years without raising our taxes in the city of Buffalo. Nobody's household expenses didn't go up in 19 years. No business's costs didn't go up. So we're going to have to do consistent tax increases, but they can't be so much that they shock the system of people of Buffalo. You know, so we're 19 years behind. You can't make up for that in 1 or 2 tax seasons. So that's why we're going to have to come into partnership with other levels of government for this 3-year plan where it gives us a soft landing. But part of that soft landing will have to be us increasing our revenues, whether it's through new businesses, whether it's through, you know, new housing coming on the market, or whether it's through, you know, incremental tax increases.
Again, on this snowbank metaphor,
Yes.
since we're talking about it, you know, Buffalo has a reputation for being a big snow city, but we also have a reputation of not being able to somehow handle snow when it happens.
Yeah.
Other municipalities nearby have, you know, the equal amount of snowplow drivers for less lane miles. How do you address this problem in 4 years to make it so side streets are getting plowed efficiently?
Yeah, it's an example, Nate, of how far down we've come. You know, there was a time in my lifetime that other cities sent their snow removal teams to Buffalo to learn how to do it. You know, Buffalo is considered the experts in snow removal. We're not there anymore. We've lost our expertise, and we will lose to storms. You don't have to look much farther than Hamburg or Tonawanda or Erie County. You know, they all have figured out how to keep the streets clean, and they often get more snow. So one thing I know is we need to reinvest in our snowplow fleet, that at any given time in the winter, 1/3 of our fleet is not working. And that means we're going to be slower at snow removal. We haven't kept up with putting our fleet back in. So what does that mean? Higher mechanic costs, because you have to pay people to always fix your busted up vehicles. But snow removal has a lot of hidden costs. Every time there's a snow day, tens of thousands of parents in Buffalo can't go to work. And if you're punching the clock for a living, you're not getting paid on the day there's snow days. Downtown business owners depend on a workforce. If their workforce can't come into work, their businesses suffer. So not be able to keep our streets clean have a lot of ripple effects, you know, including health and safety. You saw during our deadly storm how many people passed away because we couldn't figure out how to plow our streets. Emergency responders can't get to houses. So one of the things I'm going to want to be judged by is the conditions of our streets, whether it's potholes or whether it's plowing. City of Buffalo, they deserve better. And my whole campaign has been based on Buffalo deserves better. And for sure, one of the things they deserve better is better snow plowing.
Having said that, how do you balance a fragile budget here in the city of Buffalo, fragile revenues coming in, but also needing to expand, a DPW workforce, a DPW crew, infrastructure for potholes? How do you balance, the fragile economics of the city, but spend more in order to fix the problems?
So it's not always money that makes things, roll more efficiently. And it's not always present taxpayer dollars. So, the potholes, every year New York State puts together a fund, extreme weather recovery money. City of Buffalo gets money to fix potholes. They don't spend it. The City of Buffalo is sitting on more than $40 million of state grants to fix roads. They haven't spent that money. So in order to get that money on the street, it's not going to cost, right? We're already paying our snowplow drivers, but if 30% of the plows aren't working, we're paying guys to not drive snowplows. So everything isn't a zero sum. Every time you enhance the service, it doesn't mean it's costing you equal amount of tax dollars. This is the idea of efficiency. Efficiency is you go seek grants. You've probably covered the animal shelter. Mm-hmm. Well, the City of Buffalo Animal Shelter has been substandard for years. The state put new rules in mandating that systems come up to a certain level. They gave cities years to commit to compliance, but also they put millions of dollars on the table for municipalities to apply to upgrade their animal shelters. City of Buffalo's never applied for that money. Mm-hmm. So we're going to be able to do a lot of these enhancements and a lot of improvements by just relying on money that was available to the City of Buffalo, but the City of Buffalo never spent it.
The City of Buffalo is known as a snow city, mm-hmm. and we wear that with a badge of honor. We don't do necessarily a great job removing that. If you talk to anyone who lives on a side street in the City of Buffalo, what's your plan to improve that?
So I love this question because I get to use a comparison that I find instructive. The City of Buffalo has 1,600 lane miles to plow. 1,600 lane miles to plow for snow removal. The town of West Seneca has 240 lane miles to plow of snow. The City of Buffalo last year had 25 snow plows to cover 1,600 lane miles. The town of West Seneca had 16 snow plows to cover 240 lane miles. That's the problem. For the additional 1,300 lane miles of snow removal, the City of Buffalo had 10 extra trucks. I'm not a mathematician, but I know that doesn't work. This is a situation where, again, it's about what I mean by right sizing. It means we have to trim where we don't need it, and we have to invest in the services that we do need, where we do need it. And when it comes to snow removal, what we desperately need is better and more equipment. And on top of that, we need to have the mechanics available who can work on the trucks to keep our dispatch rate high. And if you talk to the people who work over at the Broadway barns, they'll tell you that as soon as an opening happens in West Her or Northtown or one of the other dealerships around here, their mechanics are long gone because the city, for all of its benefits, right? We have a 42% benefit package that we offer city employees. Even with that, the starting salary for the mechanics that we need isn't enough to compete with those private businesses. We need to invest in that area. We need more snowplows. We need to keep the snowplows that we have operational. We're never going to be able to compete, lane for lane with Amherst or Hamburg or Orchard Park because we have city parking. We have street parking, I mean. Those jurisdictions, those municipalities, everybody, there's you can't park on the street. Everyone's got a driveway. Everyone's got a garage. That's easy. The city of Buffalo has its own unique challenges, but at a minimum, there needs to be an investment in the equipment that's going to be able to get us. It's inexcusable how bad it's become. I've lived here my whole life. It was never this bad. I don't ever remember a situation where the city of Buffalo had to throw up its hands and say, well, just wait a couple days and it'll melt. Or depend on New York State, the Department of Transportation, or other municipalities from around the state to bail us out. It should be a point of pride for us in how we remove snow, and we can do it if we have the right management and the right resources.
City services are always a concern. Buffalo is known as a snow city, but in recent years, we've gotten the reputation of not being able to handle big snowstorms. If elected, how do you plan to improve our snow removal capabilities in the city?
Well, I grew up with a father that was the superintendent of highways in Harbor Creek, Pennsylvania. And I've also worked with youth crews that don't remove snow, but have done very tedious, very systematic, very scientific work, line work, where you have to be very thorough and where there's a protocol for how you do it. And then there's a method or operations that you go through to implement those best strategies. And I think that the culture at City Hall has really allowed. I had the opportunity to sit down with a previous head of Public Works, and he and I sat right at a coffee shop on Jefferson Avenue, and he pointed out all of the things that they weren't doing. Calling out veteran public service employees, saying they should know better. What it comes about to is really mobilizing a strong team, a leadership team, maybe bringing in consulting resources and training resources and professional resources to help bolster the skill set of the folks that we're doing. That's one part of it, the technical side, just being more focused on the work that we do and how we do it and the materials that we use to do it, and making sure that everything is up to snuff for what we need to accomplish. That's the first part. The second part is we have an inequitable distribution of city services. And I live in a neighborhood where there's 5,000 to 7,000 vacant lots that are owned by the city of Buffalo. They don't do anything in the way of snow removal on those sidewalks. And I have neighbors that are housebound. I have young children that are walking in the street to the school bus, all right, because the sidewalks are impassable certain days of the year. That is unacceptable. And we cannot tolerate that as a city where some communities, it's safe and you can move around on the sidewalks, or you have cleared streets, and other neighborhoods don't. That's unacceptable to me. And we're going to figure out how to do it. We're going to have City Action Corps crews that are active removing snow from our sidewalks. We may not have a full city-wide sidewalk removal, but you better believe that where the city owns land, we're going to be making sidewalks passable and safe. Because here is what the culture of care translates to, is that I have an obligation to the health and safety of every resident. My administration will take that very, very personally and very seriously. And we have already seen in this city how lawsuits and liability have cost this city millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars. And when we're cash strapped, we can't afford that lack of diligence, that lack of care. So this is about how we take care of people. This is about how we make our overall community safe all and every month of the year. And when we have that vision and we have that focus and we have a team, we can make services and service delivery better and stronger and more accountable to every neighborhood, and we make neighborhoods that are more livable and inspiring.
What is it about you that sets you apart from politics as usual? What is it about you, your campaign, that should give voters in Buffalo hope for the future?
Well, I'm hoping that what people really notice is that I care and love this city infinitely. Like, I moved here 20 years ago because I came here, spent 3 hours here, didn't know a soul. Didn't have one person in the city of Buffalo that I knew. But I knew I needed to be close to Erie. So I came here and I took the bus down Genesee Street. I stopped at the Spot Coffee downtown, picked up a copy of the Art Voice. And like I do many times when I'm in a new place, I study the bulletin boards, I study the flyers. I try to figure out what's going on. And I ended up walking right down Elmwood Avenue where everything was happening, back in 2005, 2004. And And I was just taken by the spirit of this place, by the way that people invite you in. They say, you're thinking about moving to Buffalo? Oh, come in. Let me share with you what I'm doing. Let me take you on a tour of the neighborhood. Where are you living? Why don't you live with us? Like, that actually happened. Like, I've lived all over this country and visited many different countries. And I've never had that type of spirit embrace me as an outsider before. And I think that that's what's special, is I bring a care and a hopefulness for the city, and I want to share it with other people. I want my care and hopefulness to give other people hope that it can be different. And I think that my track record and my history points to that. All of our efforts have been about building community. We've done it based on a vision, an idea, a hope, a challenge, and then we create an organism or an effort or an initiative that becomes transformational. The Buffalo Reuse Store is an example of that. It became a community, a place where people will get materials, but also education and get connection. It then became a mentoring space for young people, giving them training and an opportunity to earn a wage and plug into a community and use that as a stepping stone to another training opportunity. You know, the Foundry, supporting our small businesses, and finally, the effort to restore Humboldt Parkway. Let that be an example for how people can come together and influence the course of history. A David and Goliath story where the neighborhood rose to oppose a project that they did not believe in. They did not believe it was in their best interest, and they had a vision for something greater. Now that battle wages on, but you better believe that my learning from that, all right, is going to advise me and direct me for how we solve problems moving on. It's going to be about putting neighbors first. It's about a culture of care that invests in each neighborhood and invests in each neighbor. And we do it through these big transformational projects, and then we share it with the world. And we invite other people to be part of it, because that's how we address our long-term stability as a city and a municipality, is by having more people here to contribute to the health of our communities and the vitality of our community.
What sets you apart from politics as usual? What about you or your policies should give voters in Buffalo hope about Buffalo's future?
Sure. I think the greatest thing that I bring to the table is that I'm not beholden to anyone. I don't owe my election to any group of private building developers, to labor unions, to some political machine that's going to hand me the keys to the second floor of City Hall. I don't owe anyone anything, which means I can go into the job and say, this is what needs to be done in order to make the city better, to improve, to make it more livable again. I don't care that that's Timmy's cousin who's always had that job, or Aunt Peggy who's always been employed by City Hall. Those days are over. We frankly can't afford them any longer. For too long, City Hall has operated as an employment agency. Just, yeah, we'll hire you, because whether you're related or you're politically connected, or that's how we're going to win this election, is hiring you. Those days have to be over. What we have to commit ourselves as a city to do, as City Hall to do, is get back in the service delivery business. That's what people want. That's what people expect. And they can trust that I'll do it, because, as I said, I'm not going to owe my election to anyone. I'm going to be able to make the decisions, the very difficult decisions, with one person in mind, and that is the residents of the city of Buffalo.
What sets you apart from politics as usual? You know, why should voters in the city of Buffalo have hope that you're going to change the future trajectory of the city?
Yeah, I mean, I would look at my background, to start with. I spent a whole career as an attorney. I worked for the private sector, I worked in the nonprofit sector, I worked in government, I worked in community development, and I took all those skills and then ran for office 13 years ago. So I had a whole career of experience. I'm going to call upon that experience, and I did call upon that experience when I was an assembly member, and then when I moved to the Senate. I'm going to bring all those skill sets with me, to govern City Hall, and I'm going to bring those private sector, nonprofit, and New York State relationships with me also. We're going to need those relationships, because we're going to need to go to New York State, for some help. We're gonna have to work very closely with the New York State Comptroller, Tom DiNapoli. I want to bring him in to look at our finances, to help recommend, pathways out. And then we have to go state our case, to the governor, to the Assembly, and to the Senate. And I have relationships with all of those folks. But throughout my career, whether it's been in the private, the nonprofit, or government, I've always tried to establish a degree of excellence. In anything you do, you want to do it the best you can do it. And I've learned how to prioritize what problems I want to look at and how to measure the resources you have. And can you tackle that problem? Can you tackle it and make it better? So I am convinced that I'm going to be able to bring all these skill sets and all my experiences to City Hall. And that's what sets me apart from any other candidate in this race. I've been in the public sector. I've been in the private sector. I've been in the government sector. And each time, I've achieved very good results.
Wrapping this up, politics is pro wrestling.
Yeah.
What's your pro wrestling finishing move, and what's that say about your political persona?
I know very little about pro wrestling. I know that it's aggressive and it's confrontational, and that's never been the type of person that I've been. And I think that that's exactly the problem with politics, is that it's aggressive, it can be petty, it can be driven by hard personalities, and we need a shift and a change. We need something where people feel invited, that feel respected, that feel embraced by leadership, that feel empowered by leadership. Like, I want more people than have ever voted before to show up. I know that's probably unrealistic, but that's because people feel disempowered. They need to be given power. We need to invite people. Our seniors, so often left behind, all of the wisdom and the experience. Our young people, untapped potential and hopefulness for the future. They're the bookends of this community, and they're often neglected. We need to bring them into the fold. We need to make people feel excited to come at work at City Hall. We need to encourage them to love the city that they are empowered to serve. And to love it as much as the people that live here, that do business here, that are trying to make change here. Like, that is a vision for the future that takes us and allows us to achieve a city that is on the rise, a city that is world class, a city where every person is respected, because that is the culture that we create. That is the hopefulness that we just share with the world. And I don't know about wrestling, but I will tell you that it's going to end with a huddle with us all in the middle saying, "Go Buffalo, believe in Buffalo."
All right, Michael Gaynor, thank you very much.
Right on.
Politics is wrestling. What's your finishing move, and what's that say about your political pro wrestling persona?
Look, oh man, you're testing my knowledge of professional wrestlers. Let me think about this. I'd love, like Hulk Hogan was always great, or Randy Savage. I don't know what it is who would best personify how we're going to close out this campaign. But I will say is, we are on the ground. We are out reaching out to neighborhoods and parts of the city that for too long have been ignored by everybody. We're engaging. I'm engaging. A whole group, whole communities that have been for years just sort of left off the pages of the electoral map here in the city. That's what has motivated me is being able to engage those people, show them that there's something other than apathy, that really there can be something positive that the city can do, and that the adults might actually get into the room this year and make the hard decisions that need to get made in order to get this thing turned around. I don't know what wrestler that is, but I can guarantee you I'm coming off the top rope.
All right. James Garner, thank you so much for the time.
All right, thank you.
What's the most devastating pro wrestling finishing move, and what's that say about your political wrestling persona?
I might have to go back to the old Jimmy Superfly. You might have to do the Superfly to finish this.
Splash off the top rope?
That's it.
Okay,
that's
it. Come in with a splash, huh?
It's effective. You've seen it done before.
Yeah.
Takes a lot of effort to get to that top roll, right? You got to have the balance. You got to fight off everyone, but once you're on top, then you do the splash.
All right. Thank you so much, Senator.
All right. Thanks a bunch.
Well, there you have it. Don't forget, early voting begins on October 25th, and of course, Election Day is on Tuesday, November 4th. Our election night coverage begins at 9 p.m. on election night once the polls close right here on WGRZ+. For all of us here at 2 on Your Side, I'm Nate Benson. Thanks again for watching, and don't forget to vote.